I'm not sure I need to say anything further because the chorus, that was Alison Morissette.
Alanis Morissette.
Yeah. That, and you really did her voice well.
Yeah.
The chorus of that song really tells it all. But I'm going to, I was asked to talk about gratitude with Thanksgiving coming up. And did you know that Thanksgiving was actually a Jewish holiday that the Pilgrims knew about? I was driving up here. I'm serious. I was driving up here, and on Shaliford there's a church up the way, and it said Thanksgiving, an American and Christian holiday. Right. And I almost felt compelled to say, excuse me. But the Feast of the Ingathering is mentioned in the book of Exodus. It's one of the 3 festival holidays in the Jewish calendar. There's Passover in the spring. There's Shavuot in the summer, which is equated to the giving of the 10 Commandments. And then the Feast of the Ingathering. And the Pilgrims, seriously, they knew this, because they knew the book of Exodus. And so, and it was the fall. And so they celebrated the ingathering of what they had, and they invited certainly the Native Americans that were in the area, and it became an American holiday. Pilgrims also were pretty well versed in biblical Hebrew. So they knew all of that stuff. So I don't mind Christians borrowing it from us Jews, because we borrow a lot from the pagans. So gratitude. I was at a conference this week for my regular secular job, the one that pays the mortgage, and I was thinking, what should I speak about? I don't like to spend a lot of time preparing. I rather, what's on paper is probably not what's going to happen. Hopefully we'll have a nice conversation about a lot of things. I found that it works best that way, to be spontaneous. And it has nothing to do with ADD, because I don't have that. But I thought, what is, gratitude, we think about this a lot. A lot of friends of mine, by the way, how much time do I have? 2 hours?
25 minutes.
25 minutes.
I don't have 2 hours? Come on. No, I actually have to go to a wedding, so this is all good. But I have a point. But a lot of friends on Facebook are doing this daily, every day come up with something grateful, and certainly it's been the theme of today, and that's wonderful. And saying prayers for each other. I don't, some of the things I'm going to share and some of my own beliefs, may be a little bit different than some of yours, but I don't necessarily believe in a God out there. I call it the Santa Claus God, that we ask for things and we actually get them. I'm sorry, my life has never played out that way. I've faced, a lot of challenges in my life. So either my karma is really bad from the last go-around, or, it's just the evidence that I needed for my own spiritual growth. So I don't necessarily believe in that. But so if I don't, then what should I be grateful for? Well, I thought about it. It's those obstacles and challenges that I faced, right? Because life's kind of like a pinball machine, right? We're born like the ball coming out of the there used to be pinball machines, young people. Yeah. So the ball came out and it hit a bumper. And depending on where it hit the bumper, it would bounce this way, and then it would come down and hit another bumper and go that way. Well, those bumpers, I remember I was 20 years old and this analogy came to me. That's life. You're moving along and all of a sudden you hit a bumper and it shoots you in a completely different direction. And if you're not willing to fly in that other direction without resistance, then you're in for a pretty miserable life. So I wanted to share some texts. And we're going to skip through what was up there. One of them comes from the book of Genesis, and I love this text. It's one of my favorites. And I just want to focus on, let's see, okay. So I'm going to read what's in my version. This is a good version. Not that it's a bad version, but the one that I work with is more closely related to translation from the original biblical Hebrew. And you'll see why I'm using some of these words. Here we go. And God said to Abram, "Go forth from your native land and from your father's house to the land that I will show you." Just that one phrase is all I want to focus on here because it's just packed with so much. First of all, what do you think native land means?
Where you were born.
Where you born? Okay, good. What else?
Your home.
Your home. Very good. Say something more about your home.
Your culture.
Your culture?
Where you're comfortable.
Comfortable.
There you go.
Comfortable. So what is known, right? What is comfortable? What about your father's house? This is not necessarily doesn't recognize your mother, but let's say your parent. Security. Tradition. All right, so safety, comfort, what's known. Exactly. So why would anybody want to leave that? Because that's the way life is.
Because all our friends did it.
Good, well, because all our friends did it. But it's interesting, did you notice the name? Oh yeah, it even has it here. It doesn't say Abraham. Did you ever pick that up before in reading Genesis? It's key. I call it the Torah. So the 5 books of Moses has several places where there's a name change. There's a significance to that, and we'll get to that in a second. So now further down in the text it says, to the land that I will show you. So what do you know about this land that I will show you?
Unknown.
You know nothing about it, right? It's unknown. There's no map. We have no idea what the destination is, and we have no time frame. So I once did bibliodrama, which is a lot of fun, by the way, where you kind of play the role of a biblical character. This is one of the texts that I use. So you have, a guy and a girl sit there, right? And you make believe one is Abram, one is Sarai. Right? This is before they become Abraham and Sarah. And I say to the woman, okay, so Avi comes home one day from work and says, all right, Sarah, I quit my job today. Kind of like a melon. I quit my job. Okay? And I sold everything. Okay, so we're packing up and we're leaving this town where your family is, where my family is, everything we know is here. And I have no idea where we're going or when we're going to get there. And then I turn to the woman, and it plays out very nicely, because what's great about bibliodrama is we bring our own stuff to the character. We all kind of know what the text says, but it's really we bring our stuff to it. And one time this was done with a woman in an empty chair, and she started screaming at the chair. How could you do this to me? You never asked me. We didn't talk about this. You didn't ask if I supported this. I can't support this. This is all I know. You want to go? Take off. So it's all of this. We don't have no idea from the biblical text whether Sarah protested or not. But we know that there had to be fear. There had to be fear of failure, fear of success, and being outside our safety zone. Now, how many people like to be outside their safety zone? All right, well, there's a couple. I'm not one of them.
Yeah. That's why they're here. What's safety zone?
Yeah. So really and truly, what this text is saying, that to the extent that we can let go and come to accept that we have control over absolute nothing. Nothing. I used to think that what Judaism teaches is that there is something we have control over, and that's our free will, our thought. But unfortunately, in my life, I experienced a situation where an action was taken, and I don't believe that she made a rational choice in doing so. So even that challenged my belief in free will. So really, in a willingness to sit and completely let go. I mean, that's pretty uncomfortable for a lot of us. But that's what the text is saying. You have to, at some point in your life, pick up, let go of the known, let go of comfort, and move forward and be scared as hell. In fact, the real definition of courage is being afraid and doing it anyway. Our American thing is, courage and no fearless. That's garbage. That's Hollywood. Courageous people are scared to death like the rest of us. They just do it. A teacher of mine once said there's 2 ways to do life. And he uses a sports analogy. He said you can be in the stands as a spectator, or you can be on the field as the player. And 90% of people are spectators. Right? They're watching the players. But the players are the ones taking all the risk. Right? They practiced all week. They watched the films. They studied the other team. They get on the field and they still lose. Right? They're the ones who get injured. They're the ones who drop the ball with seconds left to go that would have won the game. And the people in the stands are yelling and screaming, "How could you drop the ball? You're in the stands. Who are you to yell? How did you drop the ball?" So the next text is going to be Genesis 32:25. Here you go. And this is my favorite text in the whole Bible. I think the core of ethics in the Old Testament or in the Torah is Leviticus 19:9 to 19:18. 19:18 is the golden rule. But those 9 verses are basically the core of how we should live our lives and how we should treat each other. Other than those, this is my favorite. So, somebody want to read that from off the wall, just loudly?
When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he struck him on the hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let me go, for the day is breaking." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." So he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." Then the man said, "You will no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with humans and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked him, "Please tell me your name." But he said, "Why is that you ask my name?" And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the place, need help with that one?
Bethel? Or Peniel?
Peniel, saying, "For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life is preserved."
Panim is face and El is God. I've seen the face of God. A couple of texts out of this that I want to talk about. Something preceding this, Jacob was left alone. So a little bit of, very quickly, he was about to confront Esau, right? He's been running for 20 years from his brother Esau. He stole the birthright. And for the first time in his life, Jacob actually did something that, that wasn't selfish. And he took his family, and split them and sent them across the river Jabbok, or Yabok in Hebrew. That, in its sense, has a lot of meaning. It's a river, it's a boundary. He put comfort on the other side of the boundary, and he had to face this alone. So he had to face his fear because he thought Esau was coming together. He's alone and at night. What does that signify, you think?
Fear.
Isolation.
Isolation.
Fear.
Fear.
Vulnerability.
Vulnerability. Can't see. Anybody ever heard the phrase dark night of the soul? What does that mean? What have you heard that meaning?
Despair.
Depression, despair,
Facing the worst fears.
facing your worst fears. That's what the wrestling match was about. In fact, in the biblical Hebrew, I'm trying to find it. It's verse 25. V'yevatir Yaakov levado v'evak ish imo ad alot hashahar. So Jacob was left alone, and a man, ish, a man wrestled. Does that say man up there or an angel?
Man.
Good, this is a good translation. A lot of people mistranslate this in their Bibles, and it says he wrestled with an angel. The text doesn't say that. The Hebrew word ish means man. Nashim means people. Elohim means God. And it does say, just like the text up here, that, you have wrestled with him in the break of dawn. There you go. You have striven with beings divine and human. And I had this underlined. Let me look at that. Im Yisrael. Im Elohim, that's the one I was looking for. So Im Elohim, with God and with humans. Now, does this mean he actually wrestled with God? Well, first of all, I think we can agree the Hebrew word malach is not in there. That's the word for angel. So that's not in there. So we can take that and toss it away. He didn't wrestle with an angel. He wrestled with God and with humans. What do you think that represents within himself?
His own struggle inside himself of
Exactly.
letting go of the fear.
There you go. So he wrestled until the break of dawn. This is the inner struggle with what Carl Jung called the shadow. The shadow are those split off parts that we don't own. And the way we know that it's our shadow is think of the things that you hate about other people. It's really you. It's really your stuff that you don't own. For example, I know, I have a friend who says anybody that gets up here and speaks to people, it's all about their ego and feeding that ego. It's part of that, but it's not all of that. But to this person, they would never get up in front of people and teach. So what I know about that person is this is something they can't do themselves because they have an ego that needs to be stroked a lot. And there's nothing wrong with that. We all do. But they just won't allow it. You know, we're all validation junkies. We're all 5-year-olds who like our heads patted, right? We're kids in adult suits. If we own that, if we just own that and say, you know, every once in a while I want my head patted, big deal. But if we say, no, I cannot get my head pat, I'm an adult, I shouldn't be looking for validation, then I'm going to hate everybody out there that I perceive as needing validation. So that's the shadow. What Jacob was wrestling with was his shadow that had ran from stealing from his brother. For 20 years he had been running and not confronting his brother and saying, you know what I did was wrong. And even that is necessarily, not necessarily a literal story, but symbolic. His hip was strained. This represents the deep psychic wounds that we all have from childhood. Can't blame our parents, remember? They did the best they could. But I know as a parent of 3 sons now in their 20s, I know my father said when I was a teenager, he says, you know, when you become a father, there are going to be some things that we did that you're going to think is garbage and you're never going to do it. And you're going to think there's some things that are okay, and you'll take that too, and then you'll invent your own. And he was right. There were certain things, generational, that I absolutely did not do with my boys, that my parents did. A lot of us who grew up in the early 60s, early 50s, you know, spanking was normal. You know, yelling was normal. Now you get defects called on you. I'm not saying it's good, better, or different. I'm just saying parents do the best they can. So any of our issues that we have, that we blame on our parents, we really need to let that go. We really need to take responsibility, accept the inner wound that we have, and notice when it pops up. So for some people, again, I have another friend who cannot take it, it's a guy, who can't take it when a female is upset with them. It could be a simple upset, you're at work, this, that, and the other, but any expression of annoyance or anger in a woman makes them almost fall apart. They start shaking. Because they grew up with a mother who seemed to never be satisfied and always was criticized. So rather than take that out on women for the rest of his life, what he should do is recognize the wound, accept that his mother did the best she could, given how she was raised and all the things that she faced, and simply own that wound. And then it doesn't own him. So the strained hip represents all the wounds that we carry for the rest of our lives. Just like Jacob had to limp the rest of his life, so do we. His name changed. Now we get to the name change. He was no longer Jacob, he was Israel. Yisrael in Hebrew, which means one who wrestles or struggles with God. So who in here has never struggled or wrestled with what their relationship is with God? Precisely. And who doesn't right now? And who won't tomorrow? Again, that's the spiritual life, is to constantly grow and change one relationship with whatever they believe in as God. So while the text said he prevailed, he really didn't. What Jacob did, what Israel did, is he surrendered. Just like I said before, he surrendered and he let go. He learned how to turn down the ego by owning it and not letting it own him. Only then is transformation possible, and that goes for all of us. Next theme, who says everything had to be good? Right? If you look in our culture and you watch television, I think advertising execs should be in jail. But if you look at television commercials and everybody's happy, everybody is in good shape, everybody has a lot of money. I want to know where these people are. They're not in my neighborhood. They're certainly not in my house. They weren't in the house I grew up in. But even the pharmaceutical commercials, you ever see that? If you have pain during intercourse. And she's like, just really happy, taking the medicine and doing all those, and all these stupid, they're happy. They got these illnesses. I don't know. When doctor tells me I have to get on medicine, I'm not smiling. So everything doesn't have to be good. And who defines what good is? Who defines what good is? All interpretation. There's no such thing as good. Which also means what?
No such thing as bad.
No such thing as bad. Doesn't mean we have to like it. Cindy and I were talking before, in the last 2 years, we both had a rough ride. And it was hell going through it. That was our dark night of the soul. And I can tell you, in my situation, every night for 2 months, I went out screaming at God. How could you do this? Book of Job. He says to his wife, when his wife says, enough, Job, will you just curse God? You know, they're testing you. He's throwing all this stuff at you. You know, the children are dead. You got all these boils. He was actually, before this text, he was scraping his body with a shell because the boils were itching so badly. And she says, stop already. And he says, should we, oh, there it is. Should we accept only good and not accept evil? For all that, nothing is sinful. That is a powerful text. In the book of Genesis, the first chapter, 7 times in each day of creation, if you look in your English translation, it says what's going on, and it says, and it was good. And this was good. Day 7, it says, and it was very good. Sabbath. So if it says it was good, right, and we're going to believe, again, I don't believe literally any story in the Bible. But if I'm going to look at it even symbolic and say, all right, the 7 so-called days of creation represents creation as we know it, wherever that came from, then everything has to be included in that, right? Everything out there. Illness, war, famine, abuse, all of that has to be included. And 7 times the text said, and it was good. So, if we look at the very first word of the book of Genesis, the Hebrew word is bereshit, which means with the beginning. It could mean in the beginning because the bet in the front is a prefix. The Endless One began creating from divine light. Male and female energies combined to unfold divine emanations from which we are all manifestations. That's a Kabbalistic or Jewish mystical teaching of that one word. So notions of good and bad are interpretations. Everything comes as a teacher. And the lesson is oneness and love. That's it. We don't need a Bible. We don't need rituals. We don't need traditions. All we need to get is the bottom line is oneness and love. And look how many of your prayers today were about that. From the book of Kings. Oh. Did I miss a text or not? I did. All right, do you have the other Genesis text? God was in this place. Did I not give that to you?
It wasn't in the write-up, so I didn't put it in here.
Oh, okay. Well, it's Genesis 28. I'll talk about it.
Okay.
So now, where is God? Now, so, you know, in your prayers, and a lot of prayers in the Jewish liturgy and Christian liturgy, God is out there somewhere, right? And we pray for this God or the Spirit to show up, and, you know, and we ask for this. But maybe that's not necessarily the way it is. In fact, you had the Namaste blessing up here, which for me personally is really the way it is. You know, the God in me recognizes the God in you. So let's look at that. And why do I say that? So this text is the one where Jacob, this is before he wrestled, he's out wandering around and he goes to sleep. Just prior to this, he has the dream where the angels are going up and down the ladder, and then he wakes up and he says, the divine presence is in this place and I didn't know it. So there's been a huge consciousness shift since the 1960s. I don't think it's an accident. I don't think anything's an accident. But that's my mystical side. So no accidents. This huge shift started in the 1960s. But out of that upheaval that we had in the early 60s and the mid-60s, with civil rights, with the riots, the beginning of the Vietnam War, coming out of the 1950s, all that stuff. And some say that there was a beginning of a shift from thousands of years of masculine energy in the universe to a new feminine energy. Call it the dawning of the age of Aquarius. Well, out of this came a teaching of non-duality, that all is God, all is one, and that any separation that we think we have with each other or anything else is an illusion. Sounds pretty Buddhist, but this comes from a book about non-dual Judaism. In the prophet Joel 2:28, text says, "And it shall come to pass afterwards that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams, and your young men shall see visions." From a Jewish perspective, what this is saying is this higher consciousness that's been evolving will have us all be prophets. You know, we read about these prophets. Sydney's taking this class on intuition. Guess what? We all have it. It was just a little bit more developed in what we call these prophets. They were just intuitives. God didn't speak to them. They got it from here. As do modern day intuitives. They were very intuitive people who were awake and enlightened. And almost all of them, at least from the Jewish point of view, were admonishing the people for getting off track. Again, defaulting to ego and not getting that oneness and love is all that matters. In Judaism, there's a teaching that everybody's born with two inclinations, a Yetzer Hara, the inclination for evil or selfishness, and Yetzer HaTov, the inclination for good. But the rabbis of the Talmud said our natural inclination is Yetzer Hara, selfishness, not good. So I've had students in my classes, absolutely not. We're all born good, we're all wonderful. I said, we are, but put 2 6-month-olds in a playpen with one toy, and it ain't going to be good. So our natural inclination is self-centeredness and ego. That's how we're wired up. And so what? Remember that thing I started with shadow? If anybody's out there thinking, oh, not me, I'm not about selfishness. You are, and I am, and everybody is. Otherwise, we wouldn't get up in the morning and go to work. You know, greed is not bad unless it's abusive. So Joel is saying, as I said, that we all have this ability, and this time will come when this consciousness evolves in everyone, where we all just start acknowledging the God within, because God is within. In Micah, chapter 4:3, he says, though all people walk, each in the names of its gods, we will walk in the name of one divinity forever and ever. This is a famous prophecy, shall beat your swords into plowshares, the lion shall lie with the lamb, so on and so forth. This is the end line of that text. What Micah is saying, there will come a time when we will evolve. And all of our different religions will just be like, some people speak Spanish, some people speak Greek, some people speak Chinese, but it's still communication. And you know there's one language that everybody understands regardless of what they speak. Anybody know what that is?
Love.
Yeah.
Music.
And music. Love and music. That's it. No matter, you don't have to speak a word. People get love. People hear music and they have an emotional experience, no matter where you are. So even Richard Rohr, Franciscan priest, who I love and I get his daily messages, wrote just this weekend about the Sabbath. He said, we are just a flicker of a much larger flame that is life, consciousness, being, God's very self. Unfortunately, the way to get to this is through the dark night of the soul. People don't wake up unless they're hit up the side of the head. That's just the way we're wired up. So when we go through these challenges and struggles, in the chorus of the Alison Morissette song, she's thankful for disillusionment. Right? Let me look at these words here. Thank you for terror. Thank you for disillusionment. Thank you for frailty. Thank you for consequence. Thank you for silence. All that stuff is necessary. So don't fight it. Don't drug it. Don't drink it. Don't sex it. Don't work it. Just be it. That's all there is. So there's three types of prayers. One of them is help. One of them is thank you. Second one, and the third one is wow. So think about that. Help, Psalm 22. Because when we're in a struggling wrestling match like Jacob was, I don't care if you're an atheist, there are no atheists in a foxhole. Okay? Psalm 22 says, my God, why have you abandoned me? Why so far from delivering me? I cry by day, and you answer me not. So who said God was Santa Claus? What if there was no God out there not hearing us? What if the God within us all were there to show compassion when we needed compassion? What if the God within us was there to guide us when we needed guiding? What if the God within us was there to teach us when we needed to learn? And most importantly, what if the God within us was there to heal us when we needed healing? So be grateful for the challenges that you have. Be grateful for disillusionment. Be grateful for terror. Be grateful for silence. Be grateful for the unknown, unexpected times you get knocked on your butts. Now, it doesn't mean you have to like it. It doesn't mean you have to feel good. But I promise you, if you ride the storm, when you get to the other end, there will be growth. There will be a lesson learned. So I just wanted to close repeating that gratitude prayer that was part of the reading. And I just want to break it down just a little bit as we read it. Blessed are you, creative force of the universe, fountain of blessing. So this is acknowledging not only the God out there, but the God within. The creative force of the universe, this energy, fountain of blessing. Give thanks for the return of consciousness when I awaken each day. When we first open our eyes, we can be thankful for just the return of consciousness. Because you know, some people don't wake up in the morning. October 20th, 2013, my mom didn't wake up that morning. Thank you for this day full of living, loving, learning, and healing. May I be awake to the wonders that surround me. There's wonders everywhere in the little stuff. Jacob said, God is in this place and I didn't know it. Back to the Ezekiel text here. In 1 Kings, a great mighty wind splitting the mountains and shattering of rock, after the wind an earthquake. But the divine presence was not in the wind or the earthquake or the fire. The divine presence was in a soft murmuring sound, which many call the soft, still voice within. So it's right there inside all of us. Wonders that surround us all the time. May I be alive to love. May I be aware of love, beauty, and most importantly, that every place I step is holy ground. So I leave you with that. Any questions? Comments? Yeah, buts?